Good morning, good afternoon. I'm your host, Mark O'Brien of CM First. Thank you very much for attending today's webinar on Bots to the Rescue, Enterprise System Onboarding with RPA, or Robotic Process Automation. Today, you're going to hear from several people on this important topic, including Pat, who's a director of RPA at our co-host, HelpSystems, and Roger Hammer, our director of services and products. Today's webcast is all about taking a meaningful look at one of the fastest growing areas of IT. RPA, Robotic Process Automation, offers a rapid payback on manual tasks, and CM First has even got an extremely low risk, low cost offer to see if this makes sense for deploying within your organization in 2020. I think we've got a poll question coming up here. So poll number one question is, what area of IT has been impacted the most by COVID or working from home in your organization? Your options are kind of functional areas of the company: finance, supply chain, human resources, sales, or other. Okay, so let's see the reactions. So voting, human resources definitely got, looks like quite a bit, and sales, it's evenly split with that, and there are no responses for finance or supply chain or other. That's very interesting. So we're going to delve into more on the human resources side today with Pat's examples and Roger as well. So we're in introductions, and then we're going to talk about RPA in the COVID era, and then give you some ROI examples, as well as a demonstration of how to use RPA for enterprise onboarding, followed by a CM First offer, as well as a question and answer session. So for those of you who are not familiar with CM First, we are headquartered in Austin, Texas. We also have offices in France and Switzerland, in Europe. We're partnered with top IBM-I and IBM-Z technology firms, including, of course, IBM, CA Technologies / Broadcom, HelpSystems, and several others. We've assisted over 400 enterprises since 2010, including some of the logos that you see at the bottom. Our goal is to provide the most reliable, rapid, and cost-effective software tools and services so that we can optimize and transform enterprise applications. RPA is key to that strategy. In fact, some of you may have heard this, that RPA was recently so successful that 3 weeks ago that the Small Business Administration banned its use for the PPP loan application process. It's kind of ironic. A number of banks have implemented RPA, and they overwhelmed the tool that SBA uses for intake into their system. So ironically, RPA worked too well. So I'd like to introduce you now to Pat Cameron, Director of RPA for HelpSystems, who's going to walk through what RPA means to organizations in this COVID era.
Well, thank you. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. A little bit about my background for those of you that are IBM-I people. I started out years ago on a System 38 and was an operations manager in a shop that ran IBM-I here in Minnesota. And have been with HelpSystems for about 20 years, working with a lot of our different lines of products and working with our RPA tool for about the last 6 years, I think. So lots of experience in the operations world and automation. And, I think even over the last, I don't know, however many years of my career, it's been pieces of automation. So welcome. So at HelpSystems, we try to focus on 2 broad categories of products: security and automation. And those 2 categories bring lots of value to our customers. So on the security side, we provide a broad portfolio of solutions that include data security, such as our Go Anywhere secure file transfer software, and also our ClearSwift data loss protection product line. Also, our core security, identity governance, and administration product offers an integrated identity and access management suite that includes tools to manage your bot profiles. So if you're using an RPA tool, those automation pieces need users, and so we can manage those bot profiles as well. And then we also have an infrastructure protection products to secure your networks and hardware. But on the automation side, we also have a broad suite that includes infrastructure automation, such as vital capacity management, workload automation. We have a couple of different workload enterprise scheduling tools that are more traditional schedulers for back office and batch automation. And then we have our RPA suite of products that we'll be talking about today. And so I thought I'd use my time today just to show you a few examples of RPA and how some of our customers are using it in the real world. Next slide. There you go. So I brought just a few videos. So this is an example of a robot or an Automate bot that's doing data entry. So it's an example of Automate entering a purchase order into an accounting system. And this one happens to be Sage 50. And it does have a Windows interface, but we could do the same on a green screen interface as well. I want to start the video up just a little bit. The data is coming from a spreadsheet. I'm always using Excel for our examples, but it could be coming from a database, or it could be coming from an electronic form that maybe your customer sends in. And Automate finds each field on the screen and enters the proper amount, and there are never any typos. Once it completes entering the information on this purchase order, then it saves it, but it could upload it to SharePoint or email it or whatever needs to be done with it. I worked with one of our customers a few weeks ago who manufactures and distributes hand sanitizer and disinfectant supplies. And what happened with them, they use BPEX, if you're familiar with that, for their order entry system. And what started happening is from their customers that they were getting like 10 cases in an order. Now they were getting 500 cases in an order. So what they were doing was manually going into BPEX, into that green screen, and changing the quantities so that they could keep up with their orders for their customers. And so what we were able to do is create a bot that did that for them. It would read the data in, and I believe it was reading in from a spreadsheet as well, log into the IBMI, log into BPEX, and change those quantities for those purchase orders. So it really helped them out when they were so busy. Let's take a look at the next example then in this task that we have. So this is kind of related to the PPP. This is an example of reading, using our OCR action to read a mortgage application. So if you want to go ahead and click and start that out, what this task does is it reads through a folder that has a whole bunch of PDF files in it. And this happens to be a mortgage application that I was able to get. But it could be any type of a loan application, any type of a PDF file or image, actually. Automate reads the file information from the folder, and then using the OCR action that we have built into Automate, it will select just specific fields in each file and then write them out to that spreadsheet. So again, we always use Excel, but that data target could be any other type of repository. We worked with several customers, smaller credit unions, et cetera, that were overloaded with processing their PPP loans, and we helped them automate some pieces of that process. Maybe you can't always automate 100% of that process, but automation and RPA can absolutely help you automate a big percentage of any of those manual tasks that you're doing. So I hadn't heard before we were talking about this webinar that the SBA shut down the automation for PPP because it was doing too well. So that's kind of crazy. And then take a look at the last one. So now this one is some tasks that we put together for our customers to kind of help them keep track of how their employees are doing. Everybody's working at home now and talking and thinking about how are we going to come back to work. And so we had to know that how they were health-wise. And so if you go ahead and click on that and start that up, we've got a couple of different workflows here. And the first one that runs, it goes out and it reads Active Directory, and it gets the email address for all of the employees in the company. And then what it does is it sends, and we've got this scheduled to run periodically, maybe once a day or maybe once a week. And what it does is it pulls in all those email addresses, and then it sends an email to all of the employees. And within that email is a survey. And this one is an example. It's just very simple. Who are you? What's your email address? How are you feeling? Are you having any of these symptoms? Fills out the survey. The survey goes back and uploads it to a smart sheet. And now we've got another task that's going to run maybe at the end of the day or the end of the week that will go out and report on the results of that survey. So the second one creates a couple of reports and emails them to HR, whoever needs to know this information. And the first one has a spreadsheet on it that's got the results. Who answered the survey? What did they answer? How are they doing? And then the second one creates another spreadsheet of people that did not respond. And so now you've got a list of who responded and who didn't. And all that can be done automatically, so HR doesn't have to be sending out those emails. So in the next slide, we've got just kind of a list of different types of examples of how RPA can be used in your business. Lots of customers that we have are using it for automation for web browsers and GUI, any kind of graphical user interface, and that would include a green screen. It can be used to log into portals or websites, terminal sessions, and execute commands, or select objects on the screen and maybe write them to another application. Data extraction is a big use of RPA, extracting data from a source and sending it to a target. I always talk about Automate as being kind of the great integrator. If you've got two applications and you need to get data from one to the other, Automate can do that for you. And typically RPA is used for that integration between applications. Lots of customers using it for creating and distributing reports and files. We do have an FTP client, so we will support standard and secure FTP, as well as encryption and compression of files before that transfer occurs. So we can automate those pieces, and they can be part of a larger workflow, as you saw earlier. Email automation is a huge time saver for people. So if you're waiting and monitoring an inbox for an invoice or a PO or something coming from one of your customers or clients or vendors, Automate can watch that inbox for you and then process those files as soon as they arrive. If there are attachments, it can take those attachments and save them off to a folder somewhere and do that processing so that you don't have to watch that inbox. And then Automate can also do some monitoring of applications and servers. We have a lot of people that use it for testing their websites. If you make changes to your website, you can have an Automate test that will go out and make sure that all those changes are in place, the screens look like they should, that your response time is acceptable, and that the services are up and running and needed. And if there is some type of a problem, it can notify the help desk or actually open up a ticket immediately and send that information over to that ticket, so we can help with lots of different areas in IT as well as different business process areas. And then the last thing that I'd like to leave you with is we have a bot store that you can use to download pre-built automation pieces. So we'll take a look at the next slide, and I think I'll send this out in the chat. So I have a link to our bot store. I'll send that out to everyone if I can. Well, maybe I can only send it to organizers, etc. So we'll send that to you after today's session so that you have a link to this bot store. Now in it, as you can see, we've got some IBMI bots that we've created, and there are 3 of them. We're still working on this. But the IBMI bots include one that executes the create user profile command. It can read in information or data from your Active Directory, and then take that data and create user profiles over on your IBMI as well. And it will prompt you if you want to use, first initial, last name. I know you're limited to 10 characters over there, and so it'll ask you how you want to parse out that username. The bot in the middle there that says obtain system metrics, that executes the worksys status command, and then it parses out the fields and creates a really nice report and a log so that you have kind of a historical record of the performance metrics on your system. And then the third one that we have there now uses ODBC to query physical files on your system for reporting. And it's built so that you can enter the file that you want to query and the fields that you want to query as well. And then yesterday I met with our bot master, and we're creating some other bots together. But he's working on one that will kind of help manage spool files, which I think that management can always be kind of painful on an IBMI. When I was the operations manager, it would make me crazy that my systems would just fill up with spool files. So we're trying to create a quick, easy bot that you can have that will go out and check for the system status and check the spool files, a number of them, and maybe archive them or delete them if they're past a certain date, no matter which output queue they're in. So check our site when you can, and you'll see when that's ready. So in addition to those IBMI bots, you can see from the options on the left side of the screen here that we've created some for a lot of common uses of RPA. For SQL, I need to run queries in my either on a DB2 or Microsoft SQL Server. Excel, lots of accountants are using Automate for managing Excel spreadsheets. And then we do have some interfaces for Salesforce and Google. Those are just a few that we have. So stop by sometime and you can browse our bot store and see which of those would be helpful for you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Pat.
You're
There's
welcome.
some really very relevant and topical examples of RPA, and the bot store is really cool with some IBMI specific bots, which will appear to appeal to some of our audience. I now have a second poll question, which is we're going to be looking at. We couldn't get all 12 of those examples up there, but we're going to give you 5 options of the RPA areas that Pat showed. So I'm asking you, which of the following use cases are going to resonate most with your organization's future plans? So the options are data scraping and extraction, report distribution, user provisioning, green screen automation, or GUI web Microsoft automation. Okay, the poll is closed now, and we'll show you the results. So a third of you were voting for data scraping and extraction, and 2/3 for GUI web or Microsoft automation. Interesting that reports and green screen and user did not get any votes. Now I'd like to present Roger Hammer, CM First Product and Services Director. He's going to demo aspects of the employee onboarding process, where RPA can generate substantial labor savings and as well as an improvement in accuracy.
Thank you, Mark. All right, so what I'm going to do today is cover ROI and a demonstration. I'm going to start with talking about 3 RPA opportunities and then an RPA scoring model that we might use if we work with you in this process. Okay, let's start with user provisioning. So user provisioning can be a lot of different things, but we have some examples here. Obviously, Microsoft Exchange, Active Directory for the IBMI side, LDAP, single sign-on, of course, change request, user migration. Also, if you have to remove people from your user applications. Now, obviously, these could be internal users or customers users, depending on the kind of applications that you have and need for user provisioning. Of course, another area where you can work is web browser task automation. We all work with browser-based tools, many SaaS or software as a service tools, and those applications can be automated with browser actions, including obviously opening and closing the browser, running the entire process, navigating through any pages that are needed. If you're just extracting maybe research information, maybe you're just extracting the page data, or interactivity actions. These are important for automating elements that are maybe not HTML. Many times they'll be Adobe Flash or some other functionality there, even save as kinds of capabilities. And then input functions, you can just enter keystrokes, mouse movements, clicks, and copy and paste any information within those applications. And then we've talked about report generation and distribution. Obviously with this, you're going to need to go get some data. So you're going to pull data from any source, really. Obviously Excel you've seen, CRIS reports, different SQL databases, ERP, any kind of web service or location where data might be stored. And then merge, process that data, format it, creating the reports your users need, and then emailing that report out. And many times this kind of process can be a regular process that is maybe run manually. Maybe it's semi-automated now, and you can now fully automate it using Automate RPA. Okay, let's talk about a scoring model. So when you begin to consider implementing RPA, so you're going to talk and think about what are the processes that you might automate. And so once you have a list of candidates, then you're going to want to look at how do I decide which ones are the best candidates, and how do we use that information to decide. So there are different areas that will help us decide this. Time savings is obviously a key area. How critical is the task or process is another area. The frequency, how often is that task going to happen? That's going to have a big impact. And then the effort to automate. Let me bring on a spreadsheet which has some of this information. And we can see all these, including the last item, lifetime of the automation. So is this a one-time task? Is this a task where you need to convert some data and you just don't have the resources or the time to do it manually, and you need an Automate bot to run 24/7 for 2 or 3 days or a week and get it all done, rather than humans doing it for several weeks of effort? So all of those kinds of criteria go into making those decisions. And of course, here we've got different levels, high, medium, and low, and nominal for filtering, and then a weighting on each one of these categories. So an example sheet then, in the case of onboarding or user provisioning, help desk, and the reporting, we've got different categories here that we looked at on the other page. So we've listed time savings depending on the particular application. Might be high or low. How critical is the task? Might be, obviously in this case, kind of medium. Frequency again is kind of a medium. Now effort, might be a little higher, but the lifetime is longer. So we've got a score in this case of 100. For the help desk automation, similar kinds of numbers, vary slightly. Criticality may be a little lower, frequency similar, and the lifetime even a higher score. So we get a little higher score there for the help desk. And then end of month reporting, the time savings, maybe in this case it's a little lower. Maybe it's not run often, but fully automating this process can still be a high value task, freeing up those people that are normally doing that work to do other higher value tasks for the organization. All right. So let's talk about ROI. So once we know what are the best tasks or the most important tasks that we might look at in our organization, uh, how are we going to determine the return on investment? Of course, the number of task hours, how many people normally do that task, the rate, the cost of those people doing the task are all going to weigh in to this return on investment. Of course, the time to develop the automation, the cost of the software, and then obviously there may be some maintenance of the automation in the process. Hopefully the task's fairly consistent and doesn't change a lot, but if it does, certainly maintaining it is easy in Automate. So let's look at a spreadsheet that accomplishes the ROI calculation here. So I've got first user provisioning, and so we've got things like hours spent per week performing that task. How much time do humans spend? Average number of people, how many people actually do this task each week? And that will give us some of the count information for number of people there. Average hourly rate, how much are those people paid to do that work? And then what is the cost reduction? Maybe it's not 100%, in this case, 75% for this customer. And so then we get the weekly and annual total cost associated with the task, and then the cost after the implementation of the automation. So the difference here being the savings. Next, we have the help desk support automation. Average hours here, we're talking about 30, number of people. So we can see that if you've got a help desk and they do a lot of different tasks, usually lots of customers needing help in different categories. Not all of those categories may be able to be automated, but again, many of them are going to be repetitive, and maybe there's an email sent. That email can be detected by Automate, and information from subject line or within the email picked up and accomplish that task in a fully automated way. So in this case, we're saying half of those areas can be automated. And again, we've got a pretty good amount of savings based on the amount of dollars saved after the automation. The last area here is report generation and distribution. This one we're calling 100%. So this is an area where many times you can fully automate these tasks and take the human out of it. So again, they can do more valuable tasks. You can even do more automation or do more than maybe the human is doing today. So you can actually generate the reports and then automate the distribution, whether that's through email or through a SharePoint location, whatever it might be. You can share that information to all of the users of that information. Once we have those results, then we can see really good ROIs here. So we've got, if we automated all three of these, 1 year, almost 300%, 3 years, heading towards 1,000%, very good ROIs potential. And in general, we're looking for something for a quick ROI to recover that cost that goes into it, but also longer term, much higher ROIs as we save those costs and time, and also create time for those people to, again, do more value or grow the business, as we say, rather than these menial tasks that may be going on here through this process. Okay, so how do we define the task? Once we've chosen the tasks, let's talk about what's needed in order to build the RPA automation. Of course, you're going to gather some requirements about that task and that process, and you're going to outline, what are all the manual steps the human's going to do? What kind of inputs does the process have? Do they get information from other people through email, directly from spreadsheets, from a database? How does that information coming in? And is there just, in some cases, keyboard entry? All those things are inputs to the process. So some of the questions then are, is that process consistent and repeatable? So now we're judging how automated can we make this process. If there are pieces of the process that are very consistent and repeatable, then those are the parts that we'll automate. If the entire process is consistent and repeatable and has a predictable pattern, then in that case, we'll automate the entire process. So let's talk about a user provisioning process here. In this case, what we have is a manager, somebody doing data entry. And in this case, since we will have potentially errors or even faulty data, we'll have corrections that need to be made. And so somebody will have to receive that information, potentially send it to someone who is going to process it. That person needs to access that data, whether it's by email or database, and then actually enter that data into whatever applications are needed for the onboarding, and then validate those entries or check for entry errors. And that may include after the fact going back and fixing any errors that were made once that data has been entered. So with Automate RPA, in general, there should be no kind of data management. You're going to send data directly to the RPA bot. It's going to access that data, open files, Excel, databases, whatever it needs. It's going to then automate through all of the steps that it's going to need to complete through all of the different applications. As Pat said, think of this not as single application automation, but a whole process and series of steps that may include a number of applications that need to get automated. All of those steps, all the data entry, data reads from one application and writes to another can all be accomplished here. And then in this case, since a bot is accomplishing the process, should be no corrections needed. All the typos should go away here. All right, so I'm going to now go to our demonstration. So we've got 3 different pieces to this demonstration. Each one of them are similar, but maybe slightly different. The first one is a Plex C++ application, basically like a native application running in Windows. It's going to check for input files. It's going to start the application. It's going to select a row, in this case to delete. So it's going to be clearing somebody from the database. And then it's going to run through the process, and it's going to have input through a file here. So there's a copy process going on. Could come from email or be manually copied there. Once it's complete, we have it putting a card on a Trello board. And so you'll see here as it completes that the Trello board will get a card indicating that this process has been completed. So I've slowed this down a little bit so you can see what's happening so it doesn't run too fast. And once it completes here, we'll see that the list, of persons in the list here have been reduced by 3 different people removed, and then the Trello card will be created. Okay, and there's the Trello card on the upper left, and we see that the original file was deleted from the directory where it was located. For the next CA2E, now we've got a green screen application, similar kind of work. Going to have an input file. It's going to read data from an Excel sheet that's again copied to a directory. It's going to walk through. In this case, it's going to read the data from Excel and actually input new information into the green screen. So it's walking through the early steps of getting to the correct screen. Now it's going to start entering, after it reads the data there from Excel, it's going to start entering all the information and walking through each of those steps to add each of the 3 users into the provisioned application. Again, in this application, we're going to delete, in fact, it's already gone there, the input file, and we're going to create a new card for the CA2E input in the Trello board. So now we've got a tracking of the inputs or updates that have been made. Now we're going to move on to a Plex Java application. This is basically a Java web-based application. It's going to do similar steps as the last one. It's going to take an input file. It's going to read the Excel sheet, start the application, and then it's going to walk through entering each of the users into the application. Take a moment to start up. It's going to log in, get us into the application here. It's going to make some selections to get us to, again, the right menu location so it can create the entries. Going to bring that over to center screen so we can see our Trello. So keep in mind, this is one small application in these cases where we're either entering information for users to provision, or we are removing users that are no longer needed. Again, you may have multiple applications that need provisioned. Some data from one application may need to go into the next, and all those are, of course, possible with Automate RPA. So we walk through, enter each of those users, and create the new users in the database. You can kind of see there on the bottom right where the Automate processes are running. It kind of shows us how that each task and step that's running there, running through the process. And I know Pat actually had the tool up in demo or in debug mode so you could see the steps. And so it's got a very good debugger functionality. So as you're building these, you can actually watch the steps run. You can even step and identify any location where you need to make a correction as you're developing. So finishing up and entering last information, and then again we're going to enter the Trello card, in this case for the Java. So we've completed all 3 of these RPA bots to show you that we ran through first a C++ or a native application, then a green screen. So any green screen in an emulator in Windows, you can use that to automate using RPA, and then in a web-based, browser-based application. So all of those can be fully automated using Evolve IT, or excuse me, RPA. And let me get this back down. And we'll go back to our, I think we can go back, Mark, to your slides.
Yeah.
There you go.
Thank you, Roger.
Yep.
Nice examples.
Yeah, nice, really nice Plex examples. So our next slide is a question that comes up me as business dev director. Why is CM First partnered with HelpSystems on RPA? As you may, those of you who know us know that we have a lot of customers on the IBM I, as well as IBM Z2 or the IBM Power 9, which is the latest iteration of that. HelpSystems is a huge reseller and player in the IBM I software marketplace, and we really liked Automate when we saw the where they were giving IBM I examples, as well as having a very affordable and a scalable price model compared to other RPA players. Many of our customers want a low risk, low cost entry point to go in and see if it's going to work for them. And also Automate works with RPG, COBOL, CA2E, CAPlex, and other pardon me, and other technologies that are relevant to our customer base. And they have a number of successful projects for IBM Power, including some new customers because of COVID. So, for those reasons, it really makes a lot of sense for us to work together on RPA. And now call your attention to our third and final poll question, which is, if you've been on our webinars before, is Mint. So M means you'd like to meet. I means that you'd like to introduce us to someone in your organization who's in charge of RPA or is looking at this particular aspect of IT investment. N means add me to your newsletter. We have several different newsletters depending on your line of business. And T would be that you've got somebody else that we should be talking to about this RPA. Okay, now I'd like to move on to talk about our today's offer to all attendees. I think it's a pretty good one. We will work with you to develop one RPA business process with an experienced automation engineer. So this is a zero cost, absolutely free proof of concept. The fine print, we want to make sure that the project can be accomplished in 30 days. And also we'll be working with you actively. If you ever engage with us, we want to have a sponsor and a technical lead work with us through the discovery and design and implementation aspects of the process. And so usually that's not too hard to find somebody who's a real advocate. And I hope there are a few of you out there on the line today that are looking to take the next step with robotic process automation and see what benefits it can provide for your organization. So that concludes our presentations for today's attendees. And now we're going to go into Q&A. So if you can go on to your console, there's a spot there where you can ask a question. I have a couple that have come in on the side here. One of them, this would be for you, Pat, is what platforms does Automate run on? We saw some examples here, but what are all the platforms that Automate will run on?
So Automate is always installed on Windows, and a Windows VM or a server, but it has agents that can execute tasks that you can install on Linux specifically. And then also, if you have tasks that you want to automate on IBM I, or I don't know, we've got some customers that use AIX, we can always execute those tasks using our terminal action. We have APIs, we have HTTP capabilities so that we can use an API to interface with just about any application that's out there. So always installed on Windows, but can pretty much execute tasks anywhere else.
Okay. I got another question from the side here saying the POC is free, but how much is Automate going to cost me over the course of say the first year executing? I can answer that. The information that we see, it looks like there's a range depending on your options, starting at about 15,000 to 24,000. So that would be basically about $1,400 a month to a couple thousand a month. In contrast to other RPA players, that is really a lot more cost-effective entry point. And so if you do some price checking, you'll see that the investment is a lot more, is in the high fives and low sixes for other options, and may not have the same bots and platforms and so forth that that we see with Automate. Anything else out there?
Yes, Marcus, a few questions that came in. Here's one. Can you share the spreadsheet? I guess that's the ROI spreadsheets.
So for Roger?
Yeah, I'll answer that. So yes, of course, we can share those. We also be glad to go through them with you, both the scorecard, the candidate scorecard, and also the ROI. So we can do that either way. Be glad to share.
Cool.
Excellent. Next question I see here is, does this technology work with CA-Plex C++ controls?
So I think it's another one for you, Roger.
Sure, yes. So you saw it run there with the C++ application that we ran. And so, yes, should be no problem running there with C++ controls.
One final question here, Mark. What ROI do customers tend to target before doing a project with RPA?
I think I'll let Pat take a chance at that, and then Roger.
Well, I'm not a very good ROI person, to be honest, but you know, certainly what we see is that you're going to get your return on that investment within the first year, certainly, and typically it's less than that. It's going to depend on the type of tasks that you're automating, certainly, and who's doing that now and how much time it's taking, et cetera. What's the criticality of it? But we would expect a pretty quick return.
Mm-hmm. Roger, do you have anything more to add?
No, not really. I mean, I think obviously Pat's on track there. You know, we're going to work with you to identify good ROI processes that you would want to automate. And, you know, we can use the scorecard to kind of differentiate those and find the high value ones, and then delve into the ROI calculator and make sure you're getting the ROI that you need. And then, of course, we can measure that over time. You know, we can come back, compare your real results to what we calculated in our calculator, making sure that the original information was accurate and correct. And so, yeah, we'll work with you to make sure you get a good ROI. As Pat said, a quick return. You want to pay for the cost of the software and the work that will be done to automate it as quickly as possible, and then begin to really benefit with the savings over the future duration.
Oh, okay, great. And as the revenue salesperson, I would say that you know, probably projects, when we have customers that can't get 100% ROI over a year, are probably, those projects are probably a lot less likely to take. And another part of the process I think that's important is looking at candidates, and you talked about this a little bit, Roger, is which ones aren't good candidates. You know, you might look at several of them and say, well, this one is not repeatable, or there are two or three things in there too, or it might not be well enough documented. And so in that case, it's like we would decline and say, no, this isn't a good use of a bot. Let's get to one that's more repeatable and more going to be more consistent, and reconciliations and things like that.
Yeah, another thing is, I mean, sometimes people have one-time processes, some kind of a conversion of data or something like that, where maybe ROI is not the right question, right? Maybe you really can't get it done. Maybe you've got a deadline where you have to accomplish something, some kind of data conversion in a period of time that you just can't do humanly. And so now you've got a tool that can run 24/7 and solve that problem, and make sure you meet the deadline rather than concern about the actual ROI. Of course, the ROI is still high if you can't accomplish it otherwise.
Yep.
Yeah, this is Pat. So we've had a number of customers that are banks that have acquired other banks, and they need to migrate those accounts to their system. And you're exactly right, that what you can do instead of hiring a bunch of temporary people to do all of that data entry is set up a automation that will just run 24/7 and get it done in that short period of time. The other case that we had that was kind of interesting was a university up in Canada that was converting all of their documentation was like hundreds of thousands of documents that were in Word Perfect, if anyone remembers Word Perfect, and they wanted to convert them all to Microsoft Word, and it was going to be a huge undertaking for them. So we automated that project for them, and they didn't have to hire a bunch of temporary people to do that conversion. So it's pretty cool.
Sounds very neat.
Haven't heard Word Perfect in quite a while.
I know, I hadn't either. They're big users of it for a while, but and mad when we had to switch to Word, but that was a while ago.
Yes. Yes, great. So that concludes today's content for the RPA webcast. And if you'd like to reach us, just reach out, look at our website. We've got some resources on there. And then we're not currently in the office, but you can always reach us by snail mail or info@cmfirstgroup.com. Thank you very much for your time today, and we'll see you down the road and on the next webcast. So long.